with such that there we go, such that we're all together. We're all getting used to that every night, mid sentence the recording. So thank you for having me here, and I'm going to share my screen so I can talk you through some of the numbers, because it's hard to just hear numbers. You really gotta, it's easier to see. So if you give me a moment, I will share my screen. And what I want to take you through is first our report on the state of anti-Semitism. AJC this is our third such report. The first report on the state of anti-Semitism in America came on the first yahrzeit of the murders in Pittsburgh. And we have now, on each anniversary, issued a separate report. Our latest report actually is combined of two parallel surveys, one of Jewish American adults and one of the general US adult population, because we're finding that that's telling us more about the work we need to do. So in both surveys, we asked American Jews and Americans across the country how much of a problem they believe anti-Semitism is in America today. And as might be expected, there are differences between those two demographic groups, and I'll tell you the differences were pretty striking. 90% of American Jews, 9 in 10, think anti-Semitism is a problem in the United States today. That's probably not surprising for most of us. 4 in 10, 40%, think it's a serious problem. That number drops to 6 in 10, 60%, when it comes to the general US adult population. There's a full quarter of Americans who believe that anti-Semitism is not a problem in our country. And these are similar figures to what we've seen in previous years when we've asked this question, both of Jews and non-Jews. The non-Jewish community, or the general American community, is not always in touch with where our community is, and that's part of the education issue that we need to engage in. One survey that came out recently, not AJC's, but Dan and I were meeting with the mayor today, and we were talking about this. If you ask the general American adult population what they think the percentage of Jews in America is, the average number came out to be 30%, which is rather amazing because we're less than 2% of the American population. But the general American population thinks that 30% of America are Jews. And that may correlate with why they don't think anti-Semitism is a problem, because they're not seeing it that clearly. So we also asked if both groups, if anti-Semitism has increased, decreased, or stayed the same during the last 5 years. And I don't need to remind you, but the last 5 years include some of the deadliest attacks against American Jews in our country's history. At Tree of Life Synagogue, it includes the attack that happened in Poway. It includes the attacks that happened in Jersey City. I mean, the last 5 years have been a rather dangerous time. 8 in 10 American Jews, 82%, reported that anti-Semitism has increased over the last 5 years. Americans in general are about half as likely to agree with that, as you can see, 44%. The general public is also 5 times more likely to say that anti-Semitism has decreased in the last 5 years. Only 3% of Americans feel this way, while of Jews feel this way, while 15% of the general population feel this way. We asked American Jews about their experiences with anti-Semitism in the last year. We felt this was a significant time to ask that question because of the pandemic and the fact that online anti-Semitism has blossomed, if you will, during the time of the coronavirus pandemic. We found that 1 in 4 Americans, 24% of American Jews, excuse me, that 24% of American Jews tell us they've been the target of anti-Semitism over the last 12 months. And our survey actually broke this down further into physical attacks, remarks in person, remarks online or on social media. We found that in the last year, 3% experienced what they called a physical attack. So that could have been as simple as knocking a kippah off the head or something more malign. Almost 1 in 5, 17%, experienced an anti-Semitic remark in person, and 12%, more than 1 in 10, was the target of an anti-Semitic remark online or on social media. Now, I just want to stop for a minute. It's really important to know that in New Jersey, we actually have an incredible mechanism for reporting bias and hate attacks, for reporting times where you've had a bias incident, whether it's online or in person. The Division of Civil Rights is not just keeping track of those things, but also able, when it's the case, to bring in appropriate law enforcement, appropriate government responses. So in New Jersey, we actually have an online portal, bias.njcivilrights.gov, where you can report a bias incident, and you can do it anonymously. You can also report a bias incident and get response and help for how to deal with it. If you're not comfortable with that, I just want you to know you can certainly contact my office, AJC New Jersey at ajc.org. We're happy to direct you to the appropriate state agencies and to help manage those things. And I know that Dan over at the Federation similarly can help and is also able to connect with me. So you have myriad people to go to. I think the most important thing is it's really important to report these incidents. New Jersey records incidents of anti-Semitism for an annual report, along with other types of hate and bias. And part of the reporting is when people make these bias, part of the reason the reporting is so good is people make these bias reports, and even something as simple as being called names out in public, which people often say, hey, that's just some really awful person, I'm just going to keep going. Reporting it is helpful for their recording. We don't think about these things. Yes.
David, can I just interrupt for 3 seconds?
Sure.
Not
please.
only is it important to report to us because we can get in touch with agencies like the AJC, but we have a full-time security director that is in touch with the local law enforcement agencies, prosecutors, all of that. So while we will pass this up the chain on the state level, we will also be handling it here on the ground locally. So reporting to all these channels is super important.
And the reason I'll Dan, I think that's, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm sorry I didn't. The Federation is great when it comes to security issues and should be brought in on that. But one of the reasons I stress this when I make presentations, no matter which group I'm presenting to, is that one of the problems with anti-Semitism when it comes to the Jewish community is what we call a normalization of anti-Semitism, that people have gotten so used to its presence that they feel, why should I bother doing anything? It's just part of what goes on. So we need to fight that normalization by bringing in our various groups, and AJC, the Federation. I see Roy Tansman, so I'll mention ADL as well. I got you.
While you mention my name, could I ask you just one quick question?
Please.
I was pleasantly surprised, and that's the wrong term, that 60% of non-Jews realize there's anti-Semitism. I think that's a high number. Am I crazy?
It's more the comparison. No, you're not crazy. The number has gone up. The 60% is higher than it was the 2 previous years.
Yeah.
We think that's because we as a Jewish community as a whole
Are
have
doing
gotten
a
much
good job of
better on communicating to the general American community that this is a problem. So I believe in our first survey, it was under 50%.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought. It would be a lower
And
number, right?
it was just under 50%, and now it's at about 60%. Remember, our first survey was a year after Pittsburgh, so
Yeah,
even at that time, we said, wow, that's a high number.
yeah,
Being just under 50%, I think it points to how good we've been in the Jewish community. And when I say that, I mean all of our organizations and
Yeah.
our federations and our synagogues at educating the general community about the presence of anti-Semitism and how threatening it is. And
but that's a good part about a bad thing.
you got it.
Okay.
You're going to hear me say over and over again, education, education, education.
Okay, I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, it's great, and I'm glad to have you here. You're a terrific resource just being with us.
You are too. Thank you.
It's a really my pleasure. So we know that anti-Semitism online has become increasingly problematic, especially during the time of the pandemic. And the statistic that 12% of American Jews were targets of an anti-Semitic remark online or on social media in the past year is incredibly troubling. It's even more troubling when you realize we were only able to, because of the nature of surveys, to survey adults, those who are 18 and over. There are many, many, many more Jewish young people under the age of 18 who are deeply engaged in social media than there are over the age of 18. So I dare say if we could survey, and I'll talk about this a bit from my work with young people, if we were to survey young people, the number would be much, much higher. We asked American Jews about the platforms where they experienced anti-Semitism. And while that number is smaller than our overall survey numbers, we had about 180 people who said they, who mentioned various platforms. We found 55% who said they experienced anti-Semitism did experience it on Facebook, 35% on Twitter, and smaller numbers, as you can see, on YouTube, Instagram, Clubhouse, and TikTok. I do have to tell you, though, because of the age of the population of the survey, if we had the under 18 group, TikTok might be the highest of all of them right now, because TikTok is among the most popular social media platforms for young people. I dare say Instagram would probably be a close second. And in working, and this is anecdotal because I don't have this from a survey, but anecdotally, when I've worked with groups of teens, and every year we work with a group of 20 plus teens in a leadership program, they report significant amounts of anti-Semitism on both TikTok and Instagram. In fact, TikTok is the one that they report most often. I will share with you just two things. We had a group of young people who went through our leadership program, and in their senior year in high school, which was last May, during the conflict between Israel and Gaza, they noted an incredible uptick of anti-Semitism on Instagram. And in fact, some of their classmates were sending them patently anti-Semitic / anti-Israel, but truly anti-Semitic Instagram posts within classmates within school. And they brought them to us. We talked about them. This is a point of pride. You know, Roy just had one kind of place of good news. I'll give you the other good news. When we educate our young people on how to identify and speak to anti-Semitism, they then went on their own and replied to their peers on Instagram, setting the record straight. And some of those peers got to them and said, I didn't realize that the post I put up was anti-Semitic. And now that you've pointed it out, I see, and I'm really sorry. And they were taking down posts and they were asking for more information. We really can do a lot when we educate our young people. The other incident I'll tell you about, we had a group last year, a group of our young people who study with us, meeting with our director of combating domestic anti-Semitism, Holly Hufnagel, 2 days before she was meeting with the leads of TikTok, the corporate leads of TikTok. And the young people gave her actual TikToks, like gave her links of TikToks that were anti-Semitic, that they had seen online, that had bothered them. And they told her about how these just come to them through the algorithm because they're Jewish and they're getting hit with it. And Holly was able to take the actual words of our young people to the directors of TikTok who didn't realize the problem they had, that their algorithms were taking anti-Semitic material and pushing it in front of Jewish kids. And they were beside themselves, A, that the material was on their site, and B, that it was getting pushed to Jewish kids. It makes a difference when we report, and it makes a difference when we educate. So American Jews aren't just experiencing anti-Semitism high numbers. The American public is aware of anti-Semitism in our society. This is, part of the good news. 4 in 10 said they had witnessed an anti-Semitic incident in person, online, or against a Jewish person or institution in the last year. And 31% reported to us that they had seen anti-Semitism more than once. So their eyes are open now. This goes to what Roy was saying about 60%. That's a great number. This was a great number in the sense that in a survey, they were willing to report this to us, and that when they saw the incident, they saw it for what it was, whether they saw it on television, in person, online, in the newspaper, they knew what it was, they saw it for what it was. And that comes to the work we've all been doing as a community. It's the good news. One of the things that's most disturbing is we found that our fellow people in the American Jewish community are changing their behavior because of their fear of anti-Semitism. In the last year, 2021, 39%, nearly 4 in 10, reported to us that they've avoided at least one of the following 3 behaviors: publicly wearing, carrying, or displaying things that identify them as a Jew; avoiding certain places, events, or situations out of concern for their safety or comfort as a Jew, including, and this kills me to say this as a rabbi, including at times avoiding going to synagogue because they were worried about their safety. No one should worry about their safety when they go to worship. And finally, avoiding, about 1 in 4 tell us they avoided posting content online that would identify them as Jewish or sympathetic to Jewish issues. And just again, quickly, a personal story. One of the young people in one of the cohorts we worked with, Orthodox Jewish boy, senior in high school, said to us, when I'm driving back and forth on the highway, he actually went to a school in near Princeton, but was from Manalapan. So he had gotten used to driving back and forth on the highway. He said, when I drive back and forth on the highway, I take off my kippah and I put it in my glove compartment, because God forbid I get in an accident or my car breaks down. I don't know who's going to stop to help me and whether it will be safe for me to be identified as a Jew. And that, I don't know about you, but that just broke my heart. I can't imagine when I was his age ever feeling that way. And yet it's real. It's very real. And just so we know, it's not just our own perceptions that anti-Jewish incidents are pervasive. It's also the FBI's hate crime statistics. There were 683 anti-Jewish religious bias incidents last year. The number is about 55% of the total number of religious bias hate crimes, and 8.3% of the total of all hate crimes. So think about this. We comprise only 2% of the population, but hate crimes against Jews comprise 9% of hate crimes. And of religious hate crimes, it's 55%. The next closest is against Muslims, which is 4%. It's rather sobering, and it tells us how much more work we have to do. I'm gonna just do this last one and then skip ahead, actually, because often we wonder about anti-Semitism on college. So I'm gonna do this and then skip ahead to how we're dealing with this. Our young leadership constituencies are of great concern to us. So this survey was the first one where we asked about anti-Semitism on college campuses. We found 50% of American Jews believe anti-Semitism has increased on college campuses over the past 5 years, while almost a quarter says it stayed the same. One specific question we asked was, what were the sources of anti-Semitism on campus? 61% attributed it to the far right, 45% attributed to the far left, and 54% attributed it to anti-Israel campaigns such as BDS on campus, and said these are a problem for Jews on campus today. We also asked American Jews whether they had personally experienced anti-Semitism on campus or knew someone who had in the last 5 years. And nationally, the number is 20%. Think of that. 1 in 5 report that either they themselves or someone they know directly has experienced anti-Semitism on campus. But when we asked whether that person was either a student or the parent of a student, the percentage jumped to 42%. So our college students and their parents, just under half, are reporting that at some point they've experienced anti-Semitism on campus. It just goes to show the importance of our educating our young people before they get to college on how to recognize and deal with anti-Semitism on campus. I want to skip ahead one last statistic, because I think this is important, because you need the good news too. 8 in 10 Americans, that is true of both non-Jews and Jews, believe the statement Israel has no right to exist is anti-Semitic. Americans, both Jewish and non-Jews alike, perceive anti-Zionism as reflected by this statement to be anti-Semitic. I think this is really important, and it's actually a huge jump. That number was 74% in 2020, and it jumped to 85% actually this past year. We asked a number of similar questions, and we got the same answer, that the majority of American Jews and the general public consider dual loyalty and Holocaust distortion also to be anti-Semitic. That's the good news. There is agreement on much of what we look at as being modern anti-Semitism. So where do we go from here? Here's the important part. At AJC, our template, if you will, for combating anti-Semitism includes four key directions: defining anti-Semitism, engaging in education, and I think Dan and I, when we were meeting today with one of our mayors to talk about combating anti-Semitism, I think the word education came up every 2 sentences. It was really, really, really important. Advocacy, and then finally building coalitions. And that's the part that I know you're most interested in. We'll talk most in depth about that. But just quickly, in defining anti-Semitism, we are working very hard to promote the use of the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism. It was developed by the International Holocaust Remembrance Association. 2 of our leading AJC experts were actually among the writers of this definition. It is the definition that has been adopted by 33 countries, by the State Department, by the Department of Education when they're looking at anti-Semitism on campus, by a number of our municipalities here in New Jersey, including places like Highland Park and Clinton and Westfield and Woodcliff Lake, up and down the state. It was recently adopted by the New Jersey State League of Municipalities. And we're hoping to see it actually adopted by the state as a whole. This is an important tool because it defines anti-Semitism and helps identify anti-Semitism. And we've been promoting it very strongly as an important first step. You can't fight anti-Semitism if you haven't clearly defined it. And this is the gold standard for defining anti-Semitism. Secondly, education, education, education. I'll say that. Beyond using the working definition as a way of educating people on how to identify anti-Semitism, we have to engage in education of state, local, federal government leaders, of our school superintendents and the teachers in our schools, because they are frontline on this, and of our friends and allies. And one of the ways that we educate them is educating them on the typical terms and tropes that one hears about in anti-Semitic and anti-Semitism, especially online. And so AJC created the Translate Hate. This is a glossary. You're seeing one example of Translate Hate, which it's a glossary that takes things that are seen online and explains why they're anti-Semitic, how they're anti-Semitic, often what's the history behind the anti-Semitism of that particular trope. In this case, dual loyalty. It has myriad examples. The glossary itself is available both in a printed form, but also online. It's now an online, the online version gets updated all the time. Sadly, there are new tropes that pop up all the time online. We keep adding to this, but this is one of the great things you can do, is sharing Translate Hate with your friends and allies, giving them the tool to understand why is it anti-Semitism when somebody says, for instance, as a Fox News person recently said, the Rothschilds were behind Darwin's theory of evolution. Why is that anti-Semitic? Sometimes they don't understand that Rothschild is a anti-Semitic, the use of a Rothschild is an anti-Semitic trope. These are important things to know. That's part one of education. We also want to educate online. We want to educate people through social media. So we actually use social media to our advantage in terms of educating people. And it's something you can do as well. We've created a series of videos, and people are sharing these on social media. And as they're being shared and seen, they make a difference in terms of educating the general community about where the Jewish community is in terms of combating anti-Semitism. So I just wanted to show you quickly, and I want to show you quickly a look at, can you see the website now? Oh, one sec. Hopefully you can see the website now. Yes. This is the webpage that has these videos on them. I just thought it'd be great to share with you one video, and hopefully, I forgot to do one thing. I want to make sure you hear the sound. We've all been learning to use Zoom. I just want to share you a taste. They're short videos, but they were really meant so that people would get the impact on social media.
22% of American Jews say
they have refrained from wearing or displaying items
that might reveal their Jewishness
over the last 12 months.
My dad told me to wear a hat the other day. Usually I like to wear that on the street.
It's simply saying I don't want to necessarily have to suffer through another verbal assault.
It's harder to think about wanting to wear a star. I personally do, because I want to be that opposite. I want to be the person who's proud of my heritage.
I want other Jews to see me and know that there's a Jew standing over here.
We need to stand strong, and we can't be afraid of what might happen if we do show our Jewishness.
Hiding our Jewish identity is not going to solve the problem.
We need to be proud and visibly Jewish.
I wear a Magen David. I've never taken it off, ever.
People should be allowed to display their faiths and identities proudly and securely, and American Jews should feel no differently than that.
.22% of American Jews say.
There we go. So there are so far 3 of those videos. Are we back on the PowerPoint? You can see it now. No.
David, we can still see the paused video.
Okay.
You might have to unshare.
Yeah, no, I know. I have to. This is again Zoom. Let me share that.
Okay, we're good.
Okay, so there are 3 of those videos. You can share them yourself. This is something you can actually do, is go to the website, and we'll be sharing all these links with you. Dan, I'll share with you a whole series of links, and you can share them with people along with our contact info. Finally, before we talk about allyship, advocacy is one of the most significant things we can do. Many of you have joined us in advocacy on behalf of Professor Lipstadt as the U.S. Special Anti-Semitism Envoy. It has been passed on to the Senate now, finally out of committee, which is an amazing thing and hard fought. We're looking forward to her confirmation by the Senate. Today we engaged, and I've mentioned this a couple times, Dan and Joel, remind me of Joel's last name.
Krinsky.
So Krinsky, Dan and Joel and myself and my assistant director, Dina Dubovsky, met with a mayor as part of our Mayors United Against Anti-Semitism initiative to talk to the mayor about being someone who speaks out loud and proud and speaks out against anti-Semitism, who signs on to our initiative as a mayor, as part of the Mayors United Against Anti-Semitism, who promotes the IHRA definition by passing a resolution through on behalf of the town, and who engages in some of the things we've just talked about to make sure that we're joined together as allies in combating anti-Semitism. That advocacy is hugely important. That's the kind of advocacy that you can do through AJC and through the JCRC. And I'm really proud that we've created this partnership where we're doing it together in the areas that are covered by Heart of New Jersey. And I look forward to more of that. So I reach out to Dan, reach out to me. We'd love to have you involved in our advocacy and able to take part in some of the joint work that we're trying to do. And then last but definitely not least, and really what I was asked to come talk about more than anything, is this issue of working across civil society, across religious and ethnic lines, to build coalitions that can help combat anti-Semitism and hate. We are stronger in partnership with others. And that's because we need to frame anti-Semitism, along with all hate, as a societal problem, not just a Jewish problem. When we combat it together, we're helping protect not just the Jewish community, but we're protecting our democracy, we're protecting our values, we're protecting our American ideals. And it's really important that we get that across. It's one of the reasons that central to what we do at AJC is to form groups like our Muslim Jewish Advisory Council, like our Hindu Jewish Coalition, which is one of the only ones in the entire country. There's one being formed in Detroit right now, and they're basing it on our model. Why we create what we call a community of conscience by bringing together different groups. We're working on a Latino, Latinx Jewish group. We are working with the Urban League to foster tighter Black Jewish cooperation and partnership. Building coalitions, building those bridges is incredibly important and makes a real difference. So I'm going to stop sharing. I want to share with you, stop sharing my screen. I want to share with you some of what we've found to be best practices, and maybe hear from you some of your experiences and some of the things you'd like to know. So the first thing when it comes to building bridges is identifying partners, finding your partners. So when we're trying to look for natural partners in this work, we're looking for a number of things that will give us cues to whether we have shared agendas and whether they're willing to support our agenda and show solidarity, even as we hope to support some of theirs. So sometimes it'll be because they reached out first to us. It's not always about us reaching out to them. I'm sure Dan and Susan have experienced this, that it's not just that we go looking for partners. Sometimes the partners come looking for us, which is amazing. We always check social media. When we're engaging in work with potential partners, we check their social media very carefully, often to find incredibly favorable remarks, and that tells us something. Sometimes it shows us that maybe this isn't a partner we want to be engaged in because their social media maybe is not friendly to other partners of ours or to other people. So we take a deep look at that. Sometimes we see if they have Jewish partners among their ranks. I think my friend Rabbi Klein mentioned that we have a lot of interfaith families, and we're often going to find our partners through those interfaith families, because the non-Jewish partners may be engaged in a group or an organization that is going to be helpful for us to connect with. Many of our Hindu-Jewish connections, in fact, came from some interfaith relationships. When you're engaging with a partner, there are a few things you really need to do to be very careful. One of which is check out their track record. Look what they've done in the past. Look who they've been engaged with. Look at the issues they've been engaged with. The partners who are our best partners are the ones who've been engaged in issues that we've also been engaged in. Finding areas of common cause is the first step towards really strong partnerships. Some of our partners come to us as individuals and some come as parts of organizations. It's not an either or. So sometimes partnerships like the Hindu-Jewish Coalition are built on individual partnership, on individuals who come together. Some of our partnerships, like the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council, begin because two national organizations come together and say, this is something we should start doing, and it grows from there. So sometimes it's about looking for organizational partners. Sometimes it's just about looking for individuals who can come together. And I know we've all experienced that. Testing the waters is really important. Trying to find ways to assess the strength of our relationships. You know, a good sign in terms of potential partners or people that we're working with is, are they speaking out on issues that are close to our heart that might not be their own issues? But remember that if another community goes out of its way on behalf of us, they're going to expect us to do the same for them, and vice versa. And that's an important remembrance, because we in the Jewish community have often found ourselves emotionally hurt, if you will, when somebody we've spoken out strongly on doesn't return the favor. We have to remember that the same is true in the opposite direction. And that if people have allied with us and spoken out on our behalf, we need to keep our ears open for their concerns and what's going on with them. And that's all about establishing what we call a reciprocal relationship. The relationship needs to be one in which both partners in the relationship stand as equals, in which the relationship won't work if one side owes the other side more than, you know, in one way or another. For these partnerships to succeed, there has to be a mutuality of purpose. And then you have to acknowledge the fact that there are going to be potential disagreements, that whenever we're partnered with other communities, there are going to be times we have to acknowledge that there are going to be times when there are going to be sticking points, or there are going to be organizational red lines. And we need to know what's existential for us and understand what is existential for our partners and understand where those red lines are. So the best, for instance, I can give you is the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council at the very beginning said, we are going to focus as a council on domestic issues of common concern. And that has been the mission statement, if you will. So we have been focusing on anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. It is why we were able to manage the turbulent waters of last May during the Israel-Gaza conflict. We had agreed that that wasn't an area at this point, that we hadn't built up enough up in each other's savings banks, so to speak, to be able to delve into that issue, but that we had a lot of trust on our joint advocacy on the domestic issues of common concern. So we're focused on building on that, knowing that sometime in the future, we're going to be able to move beyond that, probably into areas where we have disagreement, but we need to have enough trust, and we need to have worked together long enough and had wins together long enough, like the No Hate Act, where we felt we advocated together and we succeeded together. Those things matter. That makes a difference. Finally, I think in these partnerships, prioritizing joint advocacy is really important. That when we can do hands-on advocacy together on an issue of common concern, we build trust, we build friendship, and we build a sense of needing to stand up for each other. So when an incident occurs that affects a particular community, we need to reach out and offer solidarity and support in the same way that we hope to have that happen when we're in need. And that is a testing ground as well, that if that doesn't happen both ways, we know that it's not as strong a relationship as we think. So it's very important. I found that keeping track of key dates is really important. Proactively reaching out to partners to acknowledge important dates and important anniversaries, and hoping that people do the same to us. I'll give you one of those things. Rabbi Kleinby, when I was speaking to him earlier, was talking about work his daughter's doing in Louisville between the Black and Jewish community. We have a lot of shared dates. One of those shared dates is the yard site of Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner. Everybody knows from the civil rights, they were 3 civil rights workers, Black and Jewish, who worked together on the vote down south and were murdered. Remembering their yard site can make a real difference. It's a shared anniversary, and acknowledging that anniversary, acknowledging something like Juneteenth, acknowledging Diwali, acknowledging, and it comes back to us, it redounds to us. People do remember the Jewish holidays they know about. They do remember. I do get calls on the anniversary of the shootings in Jersey City from the very same people who reached out when it first happened. It's become a place of check-in. We need to be checking in with our partners just as we hope that they check in with us. Proactively offering ourselves as a resource on Israel. And that's going to sound counterintuitive, because I just spoke about how in some partnerships we're going to say we're going to agree to disagree, and we're going to focus on the places where we agree. But even those who differ with us on Israel have questions about Israel, and letting people know that we're willing to answer questions. We're willing to be a resource. That's huge. It also moves the needle in terms of understanding. It's one of those ways where we can, in a gentle way, offer our knowledge without forcing it on people, letting people know we're here as a resource. We're here to explain. We're here to let you understand why this issue is so important to us, even if the work we're doing together is not going to be about Israel. And finally, drive the conversation in working with partners, drive the conversation towards commonalities. When it comes to anti-Semitism, we need to reach out to other communities that are targets of hate and bias and make common cause. and understand that quite often, more often than not, those who traffic in anti-Semitism are the same people who traffic in racism, are the same people who traffic in Islamophobia, are the same people who traffic in any of the hates and biases that afflict our country. And acknowledging that we have those commonalities, acknowledging that there's common work we can do, acknowledging that there's common training we can do is really important. And finally, last but not least, is find ways to engage in joint advocacy. That can mean coming out with joint statements, with joint letters, with meetings, but doing things together that involve making a difference. And those are kind of our learnings from our years of experience in trying to do this work. And hopefully it's helpful to you in the work that you're doing as a CRC and in the work that we hope we can all do as partners.
David, that was great. Awesome. Thank you so much. We do have one or two questions, but I actually want to ask the first one because it's relevant to what you've been talking about the last 5 minutes. And it's a real life situation that I had, you know, as a Jewish professional here at Federation, and we also have members of our committee here, so I think it's important for them to hear this as well. Back in May, when Israel and Hamas were going at it, it actually, we were one of the ones that were on the disappointed side, meaning until we reminded people, our allies, hey, this is anti-Semitism. Okay, we might not agree on Israel, but what's happening, only then, oh, yes, 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 of course, we stand with you, and yes, we're sorry, and yes, and yes. What happens when it becomes a one-way street? You know, not just on that level of severity, but also like, you know, sometimes I feel like I'm reaching out more to do joint programming, that sort of thing. So I wonder what advice you might have for us as a CRC.
I'm gonna apologize for 1 second. I'm gonna step off screen for 1 second. The dog needs to get she closed the door on herself.
As a dog owner and lover, I get it. I feel your pain.
She was sitting there crying at the door like I closed it and now I can't get out. There's true allyship, opening the door for the dog. When it turns to a one-way street, it is disheartening and it's painful. Sometimes it's a time for having what we call those critical conversations, difficult conversations with a partner where we really express why what's happening is painful. Sometimes people don't realize the pain they're causing, and I think, you know, you've seen some of that. Sometimes it's a sign that the person or organization we thought was a good partner is not such a good partner. And there are times to back off of partnerships. You know, we have to acknowledge that. And sometimes it's a time for us to stop for a minute first and look at where we've been in the relationship and have our expectations been in balance with the foundation of that partnership. And if they haven't been, then sometimes there's a rejiggering of that foundation, which could mean that the partnership's over, or it could mean that the partnership has to be reformed with different expectations and in a different way. I think this past May was the hardest time for a lot of those issues. I think all of us dealt with that in a variety of ways. I have a group of Muslim leaders that I've worked with where we actually said, all right, we have an agreement that we're only working on these domestic issues of anti-Semitism or Islamophobia, but there's an incredible elephant in the room right now. And we had a private conversation. We had about 6 of us all together, plus a facilitator, to have a private conversation about the thing we weren't going to advocate on together, but to make sure that we had, and it turned into an amazing conversation where I think there was a lot more understanding at the end of the day and a lot less grief. And there was an ability to say, we're both hurting in this moment. and if we can recognize that, maybe we can start talking about it in a different way. They were some of the most difficult conversations I've had. They were also some of the most empowering conversations. They allowed us to refocus on the advocacy that we could do together, while understanding that we were probably standing on opposite sides of the tracks on the issue of Israel and the Palestinians. Some people actually put their foot across the border and reconfigured how they were thinking and what they were thinking. It was an interesting time. I will admit, one of our partners, an imam, also absented himself from any of our partnership anymore, because he very much went in a different direction, and he said himself, "I can't sit with you." And at least that was the result of the conversation. We were able to have some understanding of that. And he walked away a friend, but someone who couldn't sit with us. I don't know if you call that a friend anymore, but he went from being a friend to an acquaintance. But
you know what, at least it was honest.
But a friendly acquaintance. So we'll go there.
Okay, thank you, that helped. I know we're running over, so there's only one or two questions here, but I'm gonna pick one, and it's something that's been on my mind as well for a long time, and that's regarding the definition of Semite. Okay, so when we say anti-Semitic, right? So Semite can mean Jews, it can mean other, Arabs from that era. Why aren't we just calling it for what it is? Why aren't we saying anti-Jewish or anti-Muslim? We do use, but why not just use the term anti-Jewish?
Well, actually, what we've been using is Jew hatred. And that's become a common usage, is Jew hatred, which the first time I heard it, I have to say it kind of knocked me off base a little bit. But I think that's the point, because it really calls it out for what it is. We need to remember that anti-Semitism is not anti-Semitism. It's not against Semitism. It's not about Semites. It's not about Semitic. It's not about Semitic language. When I was in college, the Department of Semitic Languages had, Hebrew, Arabic, Akkadian, Ugaritic. There were a whole bunch. Aramaic. That's not what anti-Semitic is about. And what I would commend to all of you is Deborah Lipstadt's most recent book on anti-Semitism, because in it she does, and I am no way going to be able to do this as well as Deborah. She's one of my heroes. I wrote my thesis, my rabbinic thesis, on American Jewish understanding and reporting of the Holocaust during the period it was happening. She was one of my major places of source material for my thesis. So I'm a Deborah Lipstadt groupie. I'll admit to that straight out. In her book, she talks about the history of the word anti-Semitism. It was coined by a German anti-Semite. And it was his term that he came up with for hatred of Jews. And it's not anti-Semitism. The word was a single word, antisemitismus. And it was a single word, and it's always been a single word. And it wasn't until American English decided it was going to be anti-Semitism that we started having these conversations about, well, if you're an anti-Semite, aren't you against all Semites? Aren't Arab Semites, et cetera, et cetera. That's a misreading of the word. And in fact, you will find in most publications today, almost every Jewish organization, in fact, every Jewish organization has eliminated the hyphen. Most publications have eliminated the hyphen. The New York Times was one of the latecomers to that, but even they've done it in their style book. The hyphen was taken away because it's a single word. It's not about setting out Semitism or Semitic, and it is a reason that some have pushed to use Jew hatred instead to get rid of that confusion. But if you want a great explanation of the history of it, how it came about, and how it got transformed into something that got misunderstood. Deborah Lipstadt's Anti-Semitism Here and Now is just phenomenal. It's written as a dialogue between a professor and her student and a fellow professor. It comes from real conversation she's had. I've given it to Jews and non-Jews alike as a really great way of understanding and being able to easily read a very difficult subject.
Thanks. Thank you very much, David. So we're over. I want to be respectful of David's time and everyone else's time, but if anybody has one last question, now is the time. You can jump in if you want.
And if you come up with a question later, get it to Dan and Dan will get it to me.
Absolutely.
Dan, tomorrow I'll send you a whole series of links that people can use. And more than anything else, I want to thank you for your time and for your interest.
Thank you, David.
It was very
This was great. And I'll just say one last thing. Many of us here are already involved in the JCRC, the Jewish Community Relations Council, but if you are interested in getting involved in all of what you heard today on the local level and the national level, and working with organizations like AJC, shoot me an email and we can talk and see how you can get involved.
And you can easily reach me at LEVYD, levyd@ajc.org, and we're glad to have you engaged with us as well. I
absolutely
see my friend Roy and my friend Phyllis here already, and I'd love
nice to see you.
know others as well.
Wishing you a season Pesach.
To all of you too. To all of you too.
Right, so our next session is actually after Pesach, so thanks for reminding me. Best to everybody.
Okay.
I will follow up as usual with the recording. Have a great night. Thank you. David, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful night, everybody.
Take care, everybody.
You
Thank you.
too.
Aima.